So hello, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm co-founder of Imagga. And today, together with Georgi, we will present you the topic for today, which is how to use AI for efficient visual content moderation at scale. This is our agenda for today. So before we jump deep into the subject, I want to give you a little bit of overview how we're going to structure the webinar right after the introduction of today's speakers and of course our company. I'll be speaking shortly about the content moderation solution that we currently offer. And then Georgi will do a very interesting demo so you can even better understand what's our platform and what it's capable of. And then we'll have time for your questions. If you have any questions or remarks during the presentation, please share them in the chat option, and we'll address it during the Q&A session. And I think this is going to conclude the hour that we kind of like set aside to spend with you and share our content moderation solution. So to start, let me give you a little bit of background about Imagga. It's one of the very first image recognition API companies offering portfolio of AI technologies. But what we are famous with is our robust customer training, helping customers from different industries to make sense of their content. One example here is PlantSnap that we've trained the biggest custom model for plants and plant recognition, and it's currently PlantSnap is integrated in the Snapchat, and soon it's going to be fully available in the US and right after in many other countries. So this is an overview of some of our clients. We've worked with various types of customers, and any company that needs to manage visual content is a potential partner of us, and we can automate the process of analyzing images and video, doing objects and facial recognition, and finding similar images, extracting colors, and so on and so forth. Some numbers about our company. We have more than 200 business customers and over 24,000 developers using currently our technology in more than 80 countries across the world. So these are some of the highlights that I want to briefly mention before I go into the subject. We've been identified as one of the key innovators in the image recognition space by IDC. We've also have processed more than 16 billion photos for various type of customers. And we train one of the biggest image classifiers in the world so far. We are partnering with NVIDIA to bring our best image recognition technology and combine it with their amazing hardware. So why content moderation, and what's the motivation behind it? Why we decided to do this webinar, and most of all, why we decided to develop our content moderation solution? We believe that there is a huge demand among businesses, no matter how big or small your company is, to automate the process of managing user-generated content and to comply with various country and industry regulations concerning trust and safety. So the speed at which content is created is exponentially growing right now, and unfortunately, the speed at which you can moderate this content through human effort, it's quite slow and cannot reflect the exponential growth of the user-generated content that needs to be overseen or moderated. So we believe that the combination between the image recognition, AI, and eventually human labor can solve the problem of content moderation at much bigger scale than it's currently available. Content moderation starts to be a bigger problem because of the regulations and because how easy it is to share content online. So there are like a couple of problems with inappropriate user-generated content. If you have user-generated content uploaded on your website, for example, it could severely damage or ruin your brand reputation if certain types of inappropriate content that's posted there. And if it stays longer than a couple of minutes, let's say a minute or two, this can be have negative effect on your business. This kind of content can be very harmful for vulnerable groups like children or for certain ethnic and minority groups. And last but not least, the presence of inappropriate content creates potential compliance and regulation issues, because in many geographies, specific types of content is not allowed to be published or even stored. And it's actually the responsibility of the company who is hosting the content to make sure and to remove the content, so like groups which are not supposed to see it are not affected by it. So probably most of you are aware of the problem that a year ago or like a couple of years ago, I'm not sure about the timing, but Tumblr got in trouble because a lot of content which was not in compliance with the Apple platform regulations was available on Tumblr. So at certain point, Apple decided to remove the Tumblr application from their app store. And this is something that can happen to anybody, no matter the size of your company. So of course, the idea here is not to, some kind of infuse fear, but to help out companies who deal with user-generated content to better manage their solutions online. So problem with the manual annotation is that due to the vast amount of user-generated content, its moderation is very expensive and very much delayed in time, especially when it rises to the level of live streaming and when everything happens online, or like in these cases with the COVID-19 behind our backs, a lot of things are actually happening online. So it's almost impossible to have all content checked by humans. Even if the human labor was very cheap, it's more morally inappropriate to engage people in checking content that can be psychologically harmful or to create lasting mental and emotional exhaustion. And as I briefly mentioned, user-generated content is exponentially growing, but to train a team or to hire people to moderate all of this content is actually something that requires a lot of time, and it cannot be, it cannot grow exponentially and meet the demand for content moderation. This also relates even deeper to the fact of changing, the constantly changing requirements and adding a new types for appropriation and for inappropriate content, sensitiveness to topics like Black Lives Matters and other issues and flags that we currently deal as a society worldwide and locally in many locations. So what is our mission? Our mission is to help all sizes of organizations to have better content moderation workflow. Big companies who need to manage lots of visual content, and maybe they already have some kind of platform set up, but also like smaller companies who lack the potential and the resources of the bigger companies. This is where our out of the box, fully fledged and very usable product comes to play. So yeah, in a way, we're enabler for big and small companies, and we try to automate the process of content moderation and make it available for everybody. So what's the overall concepts behind our solution? Of course, it's AI enabled application, and we have and when you have a lot of incoming visual content, we apply different types and combinations of technologies that we have already have in our portfolio, and sometimes we offer them as separate products. But in this case, there's a specifically trained model for the purpose of content moderation to perform various types of scene classification, object detection, facial recognition, and potentially even landmark detection and optical character recognition for detection of inappropriate text that can be baked into the image itself. And then this goes to the actual moderation platform, or like a feedback or a callback, where this content can do whatever it's appropriate in terms of the specific business logic. Here's an example why we believe that the automated content moderation makes big sense. Let's have this example where, let's say, we have to moderate 1 million photos, which is a significantly smaller amount than the most popular social media companies are managing on a daily basis. The cost for moderating just 1 million photos with the human labor could be around $90,000 and can require, let's say, 3 full-time man years. So in comparison, if you use a fully automated solution like ours, this can cost you less than $500 for 1 million photos, and can be done for, let's say, five minutes. In the hybrid case, the component of the human labor can be greatly reduced because a very small fraction of the initial content is sent for manual human moderation. This happens by definition, by definition of the project administrator. So that's the one who is determining what ranges of recognition should go and where. And so yeah, in this case, we can significantly reduce the cost for human labor, as most of the content will be processed through our AI-enabled content moderation platform. So there's like a lot of content that we try to identify, and which is available through our platform. And so what are the major use cases of our technology? Maybe some of you already are already into this space. And you might be familiar with this, but I would like to spend some time to give you some interesting use cases that we believe are interesting to be covered here. First, very obvious cases, the case where the case for the user-generated content generation platforms like social media, online marketplaces. This is one of the first major use case for user-generated content platforms and for the social media. So you can think as of our platform as a SSL certificate for the quality of the visual and textual content that goes through this platform. So partially overlapping is the case of the media sharing, streaming, and personal content apps. These are services where broadcasting or video chatting functionalities is very essential. The difficult part here is to make sure that without having to match the human number of moderations, you can actually fully monitor and check the content that has been streamed to your service. You want to make sure that this content is actually safe, and lots of customers are coming up with requirements to monitor live broadcasting. This is a huge use case, and because it cannot because you cannot have as many moderators as live streams on your platform, you definitely need like some kind of automation to manage this problem. The next case is also very typical, and it's related to dating and social messaging. Here there's like a huge issue with content which is not wanted, which is sent one way or another on dating and social apps for social media, and like gaming chats and discussion forums, which used to be very popular in the beginning. So yeah, you want to make sure that everybody who is using your platform is fully covered and protected, and unsolicited content is not easy to go through your system. And last but not least, this is actually a very interesting use case for us, is for the education solution providers and also religious institutions, where a lot of sensitive content needs to be filtered out, and where like specific types of content might be deemed inappropriate. And our platform is very powerful to manage this kind of like a custom setup where additional criteria can be easily added, and the model can be trained to manage these kind of cases. And one of the, let's say, last cases that we've recognized so far is for law enforcement, where various types of illegal content needs to be detected to protect the society in general. So this is how our technology works in a nutshell. This is like a very simple example. The content that's available through your platform is going to be processed to our API and to our moderation API, and then we're going to provide like a certain level of kind of like we're going to decide based on our image recognition how safe this content is, and your moderators or like your system can be adjusted to the level of certainty that's needed. Like for some cases might be 100%, and for some not that sensitive cases can be less than that. So to give you like a full example of what our platform is capable, I want to switch to Georgi Kadrev, who's going to give you like a really detailed overview of our content moderation platform. And he's also going to do like a very interesting demo. So I want to give the mic to Georgi. If he can switch with and continue with the demo, it's going to be amazing.
Hello, everybody. I hope you hear me well. Chris, can you indicate if you hear me?
Yes, I hear you very well, Georgi.
Thank you. So thank you all for participating, and thank you for Chris doing the great introduction in the overview of the motivation behind this solution. I'm going to give first a bit of a high-level overview and then drill into a bit more details, and also do a short demonstration of the platform part of what we do. Something that we are very proud of, and at the same time is somehow new about Imagga, is that we're providing a full stack solution, because our track record as a company has been to provide mostly the API or solely the API part, where you can just integrate the technology, or in some cases the customization of the technology and the recognition itself. But our content moderation solution was the first big leap toward providing a full stack solution that can be very easily integrated or can be used out of the box even without any programming skills that you require. So you don't need to build some software on top of what we have as an API. And the way how this is structured in a few abstract layers, we have, of course, the fully automated cloud API. It works out of the box, and it can eventually be customized and learn from user feedback. And this is just the API interface. In a lot of cases, this might be enough. If you don't have the need for human labor to review some of these items that has been moderated, filtered out or something, you can stick to using the API. Still, in a lot of cases, you may require the intervention of humans, of human labor, of us as people who are reviewing content in some edge cases. And as Chris mentioned a bit earlier, we have this hybrid pricing model where we charge for the API usage, and we can also provide you with the required human labor to annotate or to filter out and moderate your content. Or alternatively, just provide you with the user interface where you can plug your own data team or a third-party data team to review the items that need some specific requirements for what's appropriate and what's not in your specific use case. So we provide currently web and soon a mobile UI interface for moderators and for administrators of projects. And I will demonstrate this in a few minutes. We also have, as I said, as part of the service, we can handle the process of manual annotation or manual curation and moderation of content in the case of content moderation. And we are working on multiple integration options where this solution can work directly as a plugin for the most popular systems in terms of publishing, CMS, digital asset management, and a few more. So what's again, in a bit more schematic and visually pleasing way, the full solution in more details. Let's assume that you have a content that is coming from users, crowdsourced, user-generated type of content or user-published type of content. It goes to your platform, the customer's platform, and then this type of content is also flowed through the Imagga Content Moderation platform. What this flow actually means, when a new item is published on your website, you send it to the Imagga platform API. It can be fully automatically filtered out or allowed, and it can go to the moderated content virtual bucket, to say so, where it's intended to meet your regulations, brand reputation policies, and at the end to protect your users. Still, you have, as part of the content moderation platform, a dashboard where you can define certain type of ranges and what's appropriate and what's not, and in terms of threshold for various types of inappropriate content, including for such customly defined by you. And depending on the actual item, how it has been automatically classified as with a certain level of confidence to belong to a potentially inappropriate category, it can go for manual moderation. In this case, we have the component of the moderation UI that is accessible by internal or external data teams. And these data teams can be provisioned by us, as I just briefly mentioned several times. Or you can plug in with access to this moderation UI your own human labor. And all this can learn in two ways. The first one is pre-processing type of training, where basically you define some specific categories that needs to be recognized as potentially inappropriate. Or alternatively, this can learn from user feedback. And in terms of user, I mean in terms of moderators. So if somebody is filtering out something as inappropriate, then the system learns out of this. And this is very useful for those edge cases, which are actually the cases where something is going for manual moderation. Because if it's clear yes or no, this would just be filtered out or allowed. And in the edge cases, we have this additional involvement of humans in the loop who actually are used, and their intelligence and the output of their work has been used for additional training, if this has been enabled as part of the system. Let's see in a bit more detail the actual moderation workflow, which is the definition of those different rules and projects for moderation and additional kind of parameters that can define what the moderation workflow would look like. Again, if we take into account the items of content that has been submitted to the customer platform, we see here, down here in a bit more detail, the various terms that we have, the various virtual entities that we have. The first one of them is projects. So you as a customer can have multiple, let's call it sub-projects or sub-applications or things that are actually logically different from each other, separate from each other, where you can define different types of moderation rules, categories, for inappropriateness of the content, different service level agreements in terms of how much time it's allowed for an item to live by, how many items should be moderated at once by a single moderator. Then you have the so-called term categories or reasons for inappropriateness. And again, for these categories, you can define the actual display name of them, the service level agreement, if something belongs potentially to this category, how urgent it is to be moderated. And you can define textual and visual guidelines about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of its belonging or not belonging respectively to this particular category, and what range in terms of confidence of the automated technology should be perceived as the gray zone or the yellow zone that needs to go for manual moderation. Everything below that would go for approval, and everything above the threshold for inappropriateness will go for rejection, but everything in the middle would go for manual moderation. Then you have an additional layer of the so-called rules. You can think of them as some kind of a virtual tag, or something that define that, for example, when you feed an item, let's say that you have a multi-language items, because we can also moderate textual content, not only visual one. And you have the language attribute of it as a specific rule. So why rule? Because it's a rule about this item going to a specific moderator. The moderators themselves have also been assigned to rules. So let's say if I'm moderating textual content and I can speak only English and German, I'll have these rules assigned to me. And I'll be able to only process items that are in English and or German language. Then we have the actual items, which can be either textual or visual or a combination of both. For each item, eventually explicitly defined by the customer, by the integration into your system. You can define various types of attributes and rules. You can explicitly set priority for items, or you can even define your own custom set of attributes that will be displayed along with the item. So now I'm gonna switch to a short demo of this in a minute, in a few moments. And you see how the actual workflow looks like from the administrator's point of view. So we have here a sample virtual client, a customer of ours who have, let's assume that they're in the booking industry, in reservations, travel industry, and they have various types of user-generated content. One of them is the accommodation reviews. So if somebody is reviewing an item. The other one is the accommodation photos. So when let's say that somebody can contribute photos to their accommodation entity, and they're allowed to upload photos. So if we look here in the first project, the accommodation reviews, we can see here in the project settings on the right-hand side that you can define various types of SLAs. So this will be instrumental to sort out items based on priority, if they belong to the accommodation reviews or to the accommodation photos, for example. And this is important because typically you have a single team or a single pool of people who are moderating content, and they need to handle various types of tasks with various priority. You can also explicitly set priority levels, so they're not competed based on SLA, but priority. You can define in this specific case how many items should be batched for review by a single person, by a single moderator, because sometimes or oftentimes actually it's good for people to have many items of the same type batched, because they're much more effective compared if they need to switch context and, let's say, once moderate reviews, once moderate photos, and so on. You have, in terms of content policy, the ability to blur faces and car plates if you need to comply with certain regulations. So these faces are not visible, for example. You can have retention policy, which basically means how much time it's allowed for an item to stay in the system before it's being deleted. It's also, again, in terms of compliance. And why do you need to keep an item in the system? In most cases, because you want to learn from it and you want to learn from the moderator feedback. And you have moderators that are assigned to this project. You already can see the two virtual ones, Maria Smith and Eric Hoffman, who are assigned to this project. Then you have the categories management, where you see the virtual inappropriate categories. They can have various descriptive names. In this case, this is the category. There's just one potentially category that's called irrelevant. If we take a look very briefly, I won't go one by one for the second project, but again, you can see the same settings here. And then in the accommodation photos, you have two categories. One is irrelevant and the other is inappropriate. So we can see that you can have a different set. They're currently overlapping a bit because you have overlapping, you have inappropriate, but actually you can add and define whatever custom categories you may want. I'll do this a bit later on intentionally. So to look at the other settings that you have access to in the dashboard, you have the list of moderators themselves. As you can see here, they have various types of rules defined for them. So basically, these are the different languages that they can speak in this particular case. But the rules themselves can be anything of any potential type and value. These are quite flexible. In this case, it's just an example of how the language can be a potential rule with the type language and some value. And you can also assign certain priorities, again, to these virtual rules that may push the item further in the moderation queue. So going back a bit to the moderators, you can see how many jobs they have currently assigned, and you can see what kind of rules or skills, if you want, they have, and they can handle tasks or moderation tasks in this associated with this specific skill or rule. So now I'm going actually, this is a separate tab of the same system, but this is actually the moderation interface itself. So this is the moderation interface that the user is seeing. In this case, I've logged in as Maria that you saw on the other tab. And I want to start moderating items. So I need to hit on the start moderation, and then I can see if this item is okay or it's not. In this case, we see, just as an example, a review taken from a popular website, a photo taken from a popular website, and you can have, you can mark it as irrelevant or inappropriate, or you can approve it if you think it's okay. Maybe you've spotted you have various types of hotkeys. So all different reasons for inappropriateness are numbered with the keys from 1 to 9, or you can have other hotkeys like approve, disapprove, or skip. Skip is the option that you have if you don't want, for some reason, you don't feel knowledgeable, or you have a second opinion or something about an item and you want to skip it. And you can eventually stop moderating the current batch of items. In this case, you don't have any additional reasons for approval or for disapproval, because I haven't selected actually any of those. So I'm going to approve this item. Then The second item that I see to review here, it's in the accommodation photos, just remember, but it's, what do you think? It's irrelevant because it's not a type of photo that typically stays into accommodation. So this is crowdsourced, somebody has submitted the wrong photo, and the moderators has been tasked with the job to filter out photos that are not actually accommodation photos, for example, in this virtual scenario. So I can disapprove this by selecting the reason or just disapproving it. In this case, I'll select the reason irrelevant. And and I'm waiting a bit here. Give me a second, sorry for that. Yes, in this case, I see a photo that is of a potentially inappropriate nature. It might or might not be related to the actual place, but in this case, this is inappropriate. So I'm going to disapprove it as well. In this case, I can now go back to the actual list of projects that I see here, and I see accommodation reviews. First, oh, excuse me, I need to stop moderation thing here and start moderating here. I see some kind of textual review here. As I said, it doesn't need to be necessarily a visual content. It can be combination or just one type of it. And I see if this is an okay or not okay type of content. In this case, I assume this is okay or it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter for the sake of the example. I'll just approve this. And now I'm done with all my moderation tasks. Right now, let's assume that I'm switching to the dashboard. This is the admin dashboard. They look very familiar, so sorry for the confusion if I'm switching between both. But this is the actual moderation dashboard for the administrator of the project, not for the actual moderators. So here I'll go to the accommodation reviews. And if you remember, I only had one potentially disapproval category here, which is irrelevant. But I can actually decide to add a new category. So I'll call this category spam. There are no machine learning models related to this. The threshold relevant range in this case is not relevant. It needs to be moderated by just one moderator, because for some categories you may want to provide some consensus-based mechanics or voting-based mechanics where, let's say, you define that for this type of items, you need 5 moderators to review it. And eventually this will be somehow accounted in the final confidence score of if this is appropriate or inappropriate. But for simplicity's sake, we say here we just need one moderator. Also, by default, all moderators are assigned, once assigned to a project, are also assigned to all the potential categories that this project may have in terms of inappropriate categories. But in some cases, you may decide that you want to exclude somebody. Let's say Maria has stated she doesn't want to read racist comments in the reviews. Again, for the sake of the example, I won't add this addition. I'll just add a guideline here, which will be something like content that is promoting items for sale and or leading viewers out of the website. So I'll add this category. And now in this project, I already have 2 types of potential reason for disapproval. One is the irrelevant that was already there, and the other one is the new one, spam, that I just decided that is required. So in the meantime, somebody will feed, for the sake of the example, while I'm speaking. somebody will feed a new item, and then when I go to the actual content moderation platform as a reviewer, I'll be able to take a look at the different items. And now, as you can see, this is the item, and I now have this new category spam that I didn't used to have before. I can select it, and I can disapprove the item because this has been a spam item. So again, it's loading. Excuse me for that. And maybe we fed the item twice. But again, this whole concept shows how you can have categories that are dynamically added to the interface for the for the administrator of the project on the business logic side. And then this can be real-time applied, and then you can actually have these categories as new reasons for moderation in the user interface. So this is not actually a duplicate item. This is an item that has been in Spanish, as you can see here, because all these skills, or all these, all these rules that we are calling, they're also assigned based on language as a potential rule for filtering out. In the items that are not selected as English language, this is a specific exception where we have something that we recognize as a language. You can have the translate to English button that will actually translate your text. In this case, I haven't set in my dashboard the translate API keys. That's why you cannot see it translated right now. But this is just an interesting option for you if you have multi-language moderators, and some of them are not very good with any other languages than English. So in this case, again, I can use multiple reasons or just one reason, in this case spam, and disapprove the item. So I'm sorry for that. We have a bit of okay. Anyway, this is the way how the system is going to work with your specific custom categories or with the predefined categories that we have for some type of visual content. And here in the dashboard, you can play pretty flexibly with all the different reasons, roles, moderators, their access to the system, and the different type of custom rules other than the content, but something as languages, for example. So I'm switching back right now to just one more slide that I'm going to share from the presentation, and then again leave it back to Chris to continue. I just want to mention that all the all the different things that you can access through the interface, they're actually also accessible via an API. And I mean the dashboard interface. So you can have the platform API not just to feed items, which is like sending them for analysis, either by the technology and or human labor, but you can also define ways how you can access the status of the items if you want to have some specific, more deeper integration into your own system for some reason and know more detailed information about who is moderating what. You can alternatively provide some specific interface for your needs as part of other systems that you might have that is accessing the same business logic at the back end, but is not using our UI that you just saw, but it's using actually something that is custom and defined by you, which gives you more flexibility. As I said, as a bottom line, it's a complete dashboard alternative. The way how we designed it was API first. So actually we built an API for all these things that you can do manually as a moderator or as a dashboard administrator. And it also, in one particular specific case that worth mentioning, you may use this to feed data in bulks if you have various types of data, including let's say some kind of human labor management system or software, and you want to import all these accounts as moderator accounts or something, our API gives you that flexibility. So that's on my part, and Chris is going to take it again from here.
Thank you very much, Georgi, for the amazing demo and for all the information that you provided. I want to continue with my presentation, and I want to cover like some other aspects of our solutions. So of course, for a lot of businesses, GDPR compliance is very important. And it's good to mention that our platform is already GDPR compliant. And this includes several aspects, actually. One of them is the potentially the opinion to anonymize faces and car plates. So there is an option in our platform where you, faces, if on a photo face is detected, we can blur it. So people can be assured that any content that might be moderated through human interaction is actually anonymized and their privacy is kept. Also, another aspect that we have like full login access information and any actions performed on the platform, which is kind of like a key requirements for compliance with GDPR requirements of the European Union. And so you can know who has access what kind of to what kind of content and in what time and for what period. And last but not least is also Imagga itself on our website as a web developer, as like API developer with GDPR compliant, and this is also important and to know. When it comes to pricing, I think some of you might be interested in our pricing model, so I want to speak a little bit about it. So particularly speaking, actually the price for 1 million photos, which we already used as example during our presentation, is $500 US. And for like specific volumes, for bigger volumes, we have like certain volume discounts. There's also option for subscription for the platform user interface, which Georgi just showed you. And if the customer wants to actually use the dashboards and include moderation teams, that's also optional. Which is like a kind of like software as a service monthly subscription based on the number of the seats for moderators. Optionally, we can also provide you with a data team if you don't have the human labor, and we have like our pricing point over there. It's a bit more expensive as human interaction is required for that part. So what are our key advantages as a platform, as a technology underlying the solution that we're currently providing for content moderation? We believe that we have the best mix of moderation technology, detecting not only the commonly and pretty much supported in any content moderation platform, pornography, nudity, and other, but also very diverse and types of content that can be problematic, such as violence and other types of content, which can be difficult to manage, especially if they're related to certain geography or related to certain culture. We believe also that the content moderation user interface is kind of like a second big advantage of ours, as it offers great flexibility. It's quite simple and allows you the opportunity to define various types of rules and to utilize the combination between them and apply different AI models that can be trained for a specific set of problems that you want to address. And last but not least, we have continuous feedback loop. So any changes that are done and noted by the moderator is going to be included in the AI that's going to take decisions based on the content that you're going to feed the system with. And last but not least, besides the cloud version, we also have on-premise offering, which is very interesting option for enterprise customers, where like they have like higher expectations and requirements for security, and in lots of cases when it comes to content moderation of their users, there's like a lot of privacy issues and also like regulations that needs to be met. So I think in a nutshell, that concludes our presentation. I hope you enjoyed what we've shared and also our demo. And I think now it's time for any questions that you have or any other remarks that you might have. And Georgi, if you want to add something that I missed to cover, or if you didn't cover during your demo presentation, please feel free to add anything that you might think it's appropriate.
Thank you, Chris. I think we are covered, and maybe it will be good if we have a few questions that we may answer, or something that we've been thinking that's interesting we can add. But yeah, let's give it to people to eventually ask some questions. Some of them might be public, or some of them might be private. Maybe our host on the Imagga side. Let's see.
Yeah, there is one question. If we're gonna send the recording, so yeah, we're gonna publish the recording, and we're gonna send it to all registered members, registered on our webinar. So yeah, we're gonna do it.
Hi guys, you can ask your questions. I think you're unmuted now. Or type them in the chat box.
Yeah, don't be shy. You can use both the chat or the Q&A. If that's not the case, maybe we can answer some questions that we typically have when presenting the solution.
Yes, I have here a list of questions, a few questions that came through another channel. So how hard is it to integrate the solution? And because every customer's needs are very, very specific, how easily it is to customize it for my specific needs?
Thank you. It's a great question. So in terms of integration, it might be as simple as using an API. Typically, we see that it's a matter of, in terms of technical terms, it's a matter of a few hours, mostly a business day, to integrate the technology part in terms of making API requests, parsing their response, and understanding actually which is what based on our documentation. This includes even the sign-up process itself. Then the question still is how much actual business logic and integration work you have on your side, depending on what you want to achieve and why do you want to integrate the solution. So if you already have some kind of moderation process and you just want to plug in our API, it's a matter of hours. If it's something that you're still considering as a whole, do you want to moderate content and how do you approach to this? This is the main variable. So looking from a pure perspective of how taxing is the technical integration, it's very lightweight because it's the core of a simple HTTP REST API. In terms of customization, there are various ways how this can be approached. One of them might be, as with other Imagga use cases and general offerings, where we allow the customers to define something that is specifically important and interesting, or whatever other business reason they have to recognize this type of content. And ideally they provide it, or we collect it and we train the system to be out of the box in their case, in their specific case, to be out of the box ready to recognize such type of content, or such types. It might be multiple, of course. Alternative to what you saw in the demo, in terms of defining custom categories, this can work even live. It might be a good idea in the future to do a specific demo, maybe, or webinar where we demonstrate how you can define custom categories. You can provide samples, and this can learn on the fly. So this learning on the fly is the second major option on how the system can be customized. In this case, you don't need to do anything in advance. You just need to put enough content through the system and count on the capabilities of the human labor involved in the process of moderating it appropriately, until the moment when the system can be good enough to work with this type of content. Of course, this is a continuous, gradual process. The more content has been moderated that way, the better the system comes. So in most cases, let's say it's some kind of like a hybrid. If you already have in mind something very specific, it's good to discuss it with us so we can address it and make sure that even out of the box, you have a pretty good level of precision. That's it.
Okay, one last question, because we're running out of time. But this is something a lot of our customers ask. Can we integrate our own AI, our own in-house AI, with the solution, with the content moderation solution?
Well, actually, yes. You can just decide to use the UI part of the platform. So if you already have some automated means of filtering out content, or eventually flagging it for human moderation, for potential inclusion or exclusion of the publicly facing part of your web system, or whatever kind of system, you can then just decide to use our user interface to administrate it through the dashboard and to allow moderators to view those items. So definitely, yes. Our core expertise in Imagga is to have very good pre-trained AI models, but if for some reason you want to use your own, this is completely doable.
Thank you, Georgi. Thank you very much for the short and very detailed answers. So, and also I want to thank all the participants in today's webinar. Thank you very much for staying with us and for listening our presentation. There's like many other ways to spend 1 hour, but thank you very much that you choose to spend 1 hour with us. And please, if you come up with some question, or you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to contact us. You can always email us at sales@imagga.com. Also, you can go check out our website. We have a little bit more information about our content moderation platform and a lot of other really exciting technologies that we currently provide to various types of clients. And anytime you have any questions, please contact us. We can do a live demo. And if you have a very specific problem related to content management, we can probably set up a separate call and learn more about your problem and see if we can provide a solution for it. That said, thank you very much, and have a great day and a great week. And we hope that we can stay in touch and see you later here and there at some point, and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, the participants and our team, for making this happening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.